Hello, I'm Bookface, and I've got a lot of things to explain real quick. First, to anyone new here, this series is me taking aliens from Ben 10 and finding similar aliens from real-world sightings. I make my comparisons, group them up into 10, and make playlists for my own hypothetical Omnitrix. The general rules for how I make these comparisons are in the description, and details about the actual sightings are available on my website. My first video covered a whole playlist, but this time I decided to split it in half and make 2 videos with 5 aliens each, just to make the editing process a bit easier on me, and get more content. Now for these 2 videos, we're getting into a group of aliens in what I call the Less Than Ideal playlist. This theme is based on an episode of Omniverse that introduced 4 new aliens that were seemingly completely useless. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of this because it kind of made the continuity feel a bit goofy, but I was intrigued by what happened next with these aliens. You see, each of these aliens appeared later on and apparently did have some powers, albeit typically weak or very specific, or both. And so I thought it would be very interesting to think up a playlist of just aliens like this, and think of how difficult it would be for Ben to try and get through all the craziness that happens in canon with a playlist like this. I'd also like to thank the Ink Tank for letting me use their canon for making my comparisons, and also apologize for unfortunately lining it up with my video of mostly useless aliens. There are a lot of cool aliens in 5 years later that I look forward to using, but for now I'm just using a couple of jokey ones. With that out of the way, it's hero time. So the premier alien on this playlist is the ichthyparambuloid, known to Ben as Walkatrout, or however they choose to pronounce it.
The Walkatrout?
Walkatrout. And also, is that even Ben's name for this alien, or was it supposed to be like the species? They say a Walkatrout, like all of them are called that, and they never give them a name aside from that. Sorry, that just kind of bugged me for a while. But anyways, our version of this alien is the Chakao Miranda Martian, or as I call it,
Fatty Slicker.
Now, I imagined I was going to find some little fishy guy for this, but my research had different plans. Very vague plans. I ended up finding some largely undescribed alien that's supposed to be slippery and gelatinous. I could definitely see myself redoing this one in the future since those are the only details I had to go on, but this is what we've got so far. The powers are pretty much the same as in canon. If you hit it, it just kind of flips away. I also imagine since it's gelatinous, if you could actually hit it, it would just kind of, the skin would just kind of ripple like, I don't know, like slapping a balloon. Also imagine he'd be kind of bouncy, and maybe you could like squish his body into small spaces like a squid. I came up with a lot of ideas for this guy. Our next alien transformation is from the species Maxitomar, transformation of which is called Boogie, at least in the 5YL canon. In the show's canon, however, it's called that random Billy and Mandy Easter egg from the Ben 10,000 episode. For my version of this alien, we have the Gavres hairy alien, which I call
Whismell.
So I ended up finding a creature with a similar appearance, just to say a big nose and orangey hair. And even though I usually use canon as a guide, and even though I have 5YL as a canon option, I decided that for its powers, I was just going to go with the sighting instead, since, well, it was already going to be hard to find this thing. And I like to be as accurate to the sighting as possible. So this version of the Maxitomar can whistle through the nose, creating specific frequencies that break objects, kind of like how singing a certain pitch can break a glass. But my idea comes from the fact that technically that whole using a certain frequency to break something isn't just a glass thing. Everything has a specific frequency, and if you could get that frequency, then hypothetically you could break just about anything. But I'd imagine it's a lot more difficult to break something less fragile than glass. Keeps it on brand with the mostly useless nature of these aliens. Our third alien is the Nemuina, known to Ben as Pesky Dust, though I don't think he ever actually says the name in the show. He does use an incredibly high-pitched voice and growl like a furry.
Aw, man! Lame alien!
So that's a thing. I found a pretty good comparison with the Birmingham fairy alien, which I call
Euphoria!
Also, fine time to mention, I've developed a bit of a habit of pronouncing UFO as UFO because I'm a true professional. And while this alien's abilities aren't identical to Pesky Dust's dream manipulation, I think Euphoria's power can simply be described as making people really high is pretty close. This, of course, along with its flying. I'd imagine Euphoria uses its powers through energy, lights, sounds, or maybe a combination of all these things to create these weird druggy effects. And to make this a bit more spicy, I'd say this version can induce the effects of various different drugs by using different combinations of these sounds and lights and stuff like that. This thing is a walking high. I wonder if Ben would feel high constantly turning into this alien. These are the questions we need to ask. At number 4, it's our first solely 5YL species called the Squirmers, known to Ben as Astronaut. Add to the canon with Kuro the artist's drawing of a design made by Perry Porkchop P, at least according to the wiki. Our cited version is the Wiltshire worm alien, which I call the
Ad Astron moonworm.
So this one was kind of odd to work with, considering the original has the power of sheer creativity and flying around with space armor. And after a second reading, I realized it essentially acts like a Green Lantern, which is definitely an important thing to note. In the sighting, it flies around this weird little white ship that's kind of like liquid metal. I'd say this version uses that ship, and this ship can also be adjusted or reformed since it's liquid metal. And the creativity and problem solving is evidenced by the ability of a freaking worm to fly a spaceship. I think that's pretty impressive. And to keep it from being crazy overpowered, I'd just like to point out the spaciness that keeps its formations to simple shapes. You're not getting anything super complex. Also, since the ship is only so big, there's also a limit to how big it can make things. Our fifth alien, and the last one for the video, is of the species Planchakul, which Ben calls jury-rig. Likely to be my most controversial addition to this playlist, since a lot of people really like this gremlin-y thing. I will add in that, despite my typical dislike of Omniverse redesigns, I will admit that this is a lot less disturbing than this thing. What were they thinking? I found a decent substitute with the Yegorov monkey aliens, which I call
Grand monkey.
The sighting of this alien sees them with knives and super strong invisible tape. And while this could easily be added as some sort of equipment, it would feel weird to me, since that would be like if something used the Omnitrix to turn into a human and it just had a gun, because tools. So for my little headcanon, along with redesigning it, I'd say that these knives and invisible tape are actually removable organic parts of the body that work as tools. I imagine the knives being something like bone, maybe in like the shoulder blade area, and just because of the pure visual, I imagine the fingernails working like a weird tape dispenser, because, I don't know, I just feel like adding body horror for some reason. This creates an interesting image and explains what kind of powers jury-rig actually has, giving it specialized tools to break and repair things. Also, since the sighting says they live in underground tunnels, we're also just going to say that this version of jury-rig is really good at digging, because why not? Part 2 for this playlist will be coming soon, so long as I don't have some kind of mental breakdown or get distracted by a shiny object. In the meantime, feel free to check out my previous video on Ben 10 or any of my other alien videos. I guarantee they're all a unique breed of crazy. Bye!